Welcome back. So this morning, I am speaking on equanimity. Equanimity is a deep, important, really essential spiritual practice. And I want to begin with a story. It's a story that Pema Chodron tells in her book, Comfortable with Uncertainty. So the story is called Heaven and Hell. A big burly samurai comes to a Zen master. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? It's not, though. A big burly samurai comes to a Zen master and says, "Tell me the nature of heaven and hell." The Zen master looks him in the face and says, "Why should I tell a scruffy, disgusting, miserable slob like you? A worm like you. Do you think I should tell you anything?" Consumed by rage, the samurai draws his sword and raises it up to cut off the master's head. The Zen master says, "That's hell." Instantly, the samurai understands that he has just created his own hell. Black and hot, filled with hatred, self-protection, anger, and resentment. He sees that he was so deep in the hell that he was ready to kill someone. Tears fill his eyes, and he puts his palms together to bow in gratitude for this insight. The Zen master says, "That's heaven." The view of the warrior bodhisattva is not hell is bad and heaven is good, or get rid of hell and just seek heaven. Instead, we encourage ourselves to develop an open heart and an open mind to heaven, to hell, to everything. Only with this kind of equanimity can we realize that no matter what comes along, we're always standing in the middle of a sacred space. Only with equanimity can we see that everything that comes into our circle has come to teach us what we need to know. I love that. I love that story, and I love that teaching on equanimity. So equanimity is defined as mental calmness, composure, centeredness, evenness, especially in a difficult situation. And people often ask me, more recently people have been asking me, how can I stay centered? How can I be at peace with the incredibly polarizing political environment right now? And it is a challenge, and I work on it every day myself. But as always, I turn to the spiritual teachers, the spiritual masters, to see how they might answer that. It's so good to always say, what would Jesus do, right? Or what would Amma do? What would the Buddha do, right? So I often think of the words from Jesus, "These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." I have overcome the world. What exactly does that mean? To me, it means that I have grown my consciousness. I have expanded my consciousness so that I rest as awareness. I rest as the sky of awareness. And in the sky of awareness, good can happen, bad can happen, it can be easy, it can be hard, and I stay aware of the sky. Those things are passing clouds, right? Good experiences, that's a nice passing cloud. We like that. Bad experience, that's a big gray stormy passing cloud. We might not like that, but there is the sky of awareness. If we're identified with, we can be at peace with what is. We can have patience with what is. So this is overcoming the world of limited consciousness, I would say. Irvin Laszlo, he said, you cannot receive this intelligence, this informing light, cannot communicate and commune with it in your everyday state of consciousness. You need to enter a deeper state, one in which you can receive the wisdom of the cosmos and resonate with the intelligence that created your body and created everything. You need to see with the eyes of your heart. I love that. I think it was Nisargadatta that said, the mind creates the abyss and the heart crosses it. Love that. So last week I spoke on acceptance, that to begin to change anything, first we accept it. Because if we don't, we just resist it. We add suffering to our suffering. And the Serenity Prayer is all about accepting what is, and it's about having discernment, isn't it? And discerning what we can change. I liked where's Ambazawa? I love what you posted on Facebook about our sphere of influence, right? Focusing on that, focusing on what we can change, and that being where we wisely place our attention, right? And again, Jesus has great words for that. Seek the kingdom of heaven within. Work on your inner state, because you can change that. Like Gandhi said, be the peace you wish to see. So we work on our inner state of being. And that means cultivating acceptance, cultivating equanimity and inner peace. I remember back in 2016, right soon after the election, I was with Alma. Alma would always come to San Ramon late December around Thanksgiving. And, people were really stirred up, and we had a question and answer session with Alma, and they were asking her, what do we do? I'm so full of anxiety. I'm so worried about our country. And they really wanted Alma to make a political statement, and I was so curious how she'd respond. And she just really, she's so artful and skillful. She simply would not really go there and make a direct political statement about the United States, but she really directed people to focus on their inner state, to work on their inner state, and to really cultivate equanimity and to do what we can do, to place our attention on what we have control over, the change has to come within for us all to change together into a collective consciousness, because that's the core, isn't it? That's the root of the problem, right? Is the consciousness needs to expand. It needs to become aware that we're all interconnected. I love how Thich Nhat Hanh puts it, that we're interbeing. We're interbeing. It's so beautiful. It's like we're all one body, humanity, right? We're all cells in one body. And you can't just say, I love my foot, but I don't love my calf. Or I'm going to take care of my foot, but not take care of my calf, right? That doesn't work out very well. You can't go ignoring your calf, right? There's the phrase, united we stand, divided we fall, right? That goes back to Aesop. Remember Aesop's fables? He was a Greek storyteller. And that was, 2,600 years ago. And then Jesus, actually, 600 years after Aesop, he offered a similar teaching about the power of unity, of us uniting. Mark 3:25, if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And, as a humanity, I see us like this gigantic family living in this gigantic house, right? And if it's divided, if there's division, it's like the house has a big hole in the wall, and the rain's coming in, and the wind and the cold, and it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe, and it's not a place of refuge, right? But to make it a place of refuge, a house united, we create safety. We create safety. I love retreats, because all we really need to do in retreat is create a safe space, and everyone blossoms like flowers. It's amazing. And that's what we do here. We create that safe space. We come together and we grow our trust, and we water the seeds of good in one another. Another skill that is so important is nonviolent communication. love. I have a friend that's a great teacher and a trainer. I'm going to bring her here. But we create that space with our nonviolent communication, with our skillfulness. We create a place for understanding to happen and for healing to happen. Now you might say, oh yeah, that sounds good, but how could you possibly do that in such a polarized climate, almost a warlike climate? I mean, it's concerning. And so again, that's where it helps to hear stories of what others have done and how others have navigated times of great turmoil. There have been a lot of times in our history and in world history. When I was with Thich Nhat Hanh in retreat one time, he told a story, because he's Vietnamese, and he was in Vietnam when the war happened in Vietnam. Our dad was in that. Oh no, that's a Korean War. That's right, Dad's older. But in the Vietnam War, Thich Nhat Hanh refused to take a side, and at that time, he was training monks. He was already a master, a Zen master, and he was training monks, young monks. And he had them going out and serving in the food kitchen. And one day this monk came back, and he was so upset, he was sobbing, just sobbing. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, what's going on? And he said, well, I served in the soup kitchen, and then I was walking back here, and there was a tank, and there was a soldier up on the tank, and he just looked at me with so much hatred and resentment, and he spit on my head. And the sensation of it just ignited this immense anger and kind of hatred back. And then I took a breath, and then I took another breath. And then I took steps and did my walking meditation while I was breathing. And after a while, the anger dissolved and the hatred dissolved, and I just felt sadness. Isn't that what's under anger so often? It's sadness. And he felt sadness that this soldier could not realize that he just wanted to meet in loving kindness. He wanted to connect from the heart in loving kindness. He wanted to offer that and be able to share that. So Thich Nhat Hanh held him and he comforted him. He said, you know what? Love prevailed because the love in you returned and prevailed. And so love prevailed. And I was just so touched by that story. I actually put it in a song, one of my songs on my album, Return to Love. It's called Love Will Prevail. And the second verse goes, there's a young monk who's serving in a war-torn, ravaged land when a soldier spits upon his head full of hatred for the man. Well, he feels the urge to fight him, but he chooses peace instead. And the whole world is blessed by his love. The whole world is blessed by his love. And then the chorus, love is stronger. Love is stronger than the pain of separation. Love will prevail. Love will prevail. And that is the teaching. That is the teaching of all the great masters. Love will prevail. Every time we can overcome, and it's a returning to love. I told you the story about the cop giving me a ticket last week, and I didn't immediately feel love for him. In fact, when he gave me that ticket and I saw that it was $265, my love left me. It's like, where did the love go? It took some breathing, it took some time, it took some working it out, and the love finally did return, and I was able to buy that old man a piece of key lime pie that didn't have money at the market of choice. So love can return, and that's the thing. That's why I called that album Return to Love. It's a matter of returning to love, returning to peace over and over and over. If we can overcome that urge to react with anger, every time we can shift back to sanity. And that's why mindfulness and these spiritual practices are so essential. They help us identify with awareness. Because in the awareness, you can see your emotions, you can see your thoughts, and you can go, I'm not going there. I'm not going with that, right? I'm not going to offer anger back when I receive anger, right? So Thich Nhat Hanh always talks about the seeds that we water. You know, the seeds that we water are so essential. That's why we want leaders that water the best seeds in us, right? We want leaders that water our highest values, the seeds of our highest values, right? Let me share a poem. This poem is quite intense, but it's so powerful. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this during the Vietnam War. Promise me, he was writing this, I think, to all his monks and all the people that he was, you know, a teacher for. Promise me this day, promise me now while the sun is overhead, exactly at the zenith. Promise me, even as they strike you down with a mountain of hatred and violence, even as they step on you and crush you like a worm, even as they dismember and disembowel you, remember, brother, remember, man is not our enemy. The only thing worthy of you is compassion, invincible, limitless, unconditional. Hatred will never let you face the beast in man. One day, when you face this beast alone, with your courage intact, your eyes kind, untroubled, even as no one sees them, out of your smile will bloom a flower. And those who love you will behold you across 10,000 worlds of birth and dying. Alone again, I will go on with bent head, knowing that love has become eternal. On the long, rough road, the sun and the moon will continue to shine. Yeah. Pema Chodron talks about the four, there's a beautiful Buddhist teaching, the four immeasurable minds, and one of the immeasurable minds is equanimity. The others are loving kindness, compassion, and joy. And she talks about equanimity being like the cool moon, whereas joy is like the noonday sun. Equanimity is the cool moon that kind of cools us off. And it kind of cools us down because we can sometimes, I think, have compassion overload. You know I've worked on that a long time where we just, I mean, so many of you are therapists here and healers of some kind, and we can have compassion overload. So the equanimity, that's like the cool, that cools us down so we don't get overheated or overexhausted from the compassion. My first teacher, Michael Singer, would always talk about this planet and our stage of evolution right now being like a third chakra planet. And he would say that the third chakra here is the power center, and that humans are mostly exploring power right now. You know, they're exploring power and control. And, you know, when you're just in the power center, not attached to the heart, you know, you lust for power, right? And control, and you manipulate, and, you know, you just want to get what you want to get. Doesn't matter, right? Whereas when that power is empowered by the heart, when that energy rises to the heart and you empower love, you have a whole different planet. You have a whole different stage of evolution. And that's where we're at. We're making that, we're working on that shift, that move up. I haven't spoken on Confucianism. I actually really love some of the teachings from Confucius. He lived around 500 BC, 551 he was born, 551 BC. But he was not only a spiritual teacher, he was a political leader. And he was all about virtuous principles in government. And it just is so inspiring to me. It's so worth reviewing now. Let me read you what he wrote. And this is guidelines for a political leader. In following the way, the noble-minded treasure three things: a manner free of violence and arrogance, a countenance full of sincerity and trust, a voice free of vulgarity and impropriety. Doesn't that sound good? Do we vote for that? Yeah, I looked up impropriety. Impropriety, say that 5 times fast. It's defined as behavior that is dishonest, socially unacceptable, or unsuitable for a particular situation. So I really feel like what I love about Confucius' teaching, it's so much more about the we. It's not the I. You know, I want to get what I want to get. I want to be empowered. It's the we. what's the best for the common good, right? Um, so I think for us to begin to heal in this country, we have to see each other as extended family, that we are in this giant house together. Some family members you don't visit too often, right? But they're family, right? There's a story I like about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The Supreme Court Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia. Of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the liberal justice. She passed in 2020. And Antonin Scalia was a conservative justice. He passed in 2016. But they had this incredibly close friendship. To read about their friendship is so inspiring. And part of what created their bond is they both felt like outsiders, right? They were not in the New York elite. And she was a Jewish woman. She was Jewish and a woman. He was Catholic and an Italian American. And they worked in the same place, and they both loved music, and they loved teaching. They loved travel. They loved meals with families and friends. And at the same time, they were super different in their views, right? In their views of the law. And there's a funny story Scalia's son told about how his father lamented, in a good-natured way, that Ruth described his view on a case as less than fully baked. and the son said, well, it could have been worse, Dad. She could have said your ideas were half-baked. And Scalia replied with a grin, no, this was worse because it could mean I'm 1/4 or even just 1/5 baked. But it was just so inspiring to read about their friendship. There's some articles about it. And how they demonstrated how we debate and how we have our differences and how that can actually be a good thing. But what was so beautiful about them is that even though they disagreed, not for a moment, not for one moment, did they think the other should be ostracized or condemned. They believed what they were doing, arriving at their opinions thoughtfully, and looking at them vigorously, that was essential for the national good, right? And they felt that with less debate, their friendship would have been diminished. They believed so would our democracy. So the huge key is respect. Respecting the other has a right to their opinion. And that doesn't mean we put down someone else's opinion. We don't need to make things personal, right? And that's what I think is happening. And that it's gone off the rails a bit. Because when we stop being respectful, communication cannot be constructive. It cannot really happen. So Ginsburg and Scalia, they could listen. They could really hear each other. And they were curious. That's so important. They were curious about each other's position, that they had that beginner mind, that openness, like, oh, I might learn something from you. It didn't always change their minds, but maybe sometimes it did, but it created respect. And they listened to each other's view. So we use discernment. That's that part of that serenity prayer is what can we change? We use discernment. In our friendships, when we have different views, we can love each other even if our views are different. I've got friends that have completely polar opposite political affiliation and views, and that I've had forever. There's 4 things I want to suggest today with your friendships, especially in this time of, an election year. And the first one is, let friendship be a safe place to disagree. Let it be a safe place. To see if you can, feel strong enough in your sense of self to state your opinion, but not need to force it on the other person. Number 2, be mindful to not devalue the other person. Using I statements is good, and avoiding you attacks. And share the merits of your position versus the hazards of theirs. Thich Nhat Hanh has that wonderful mantra, you're partly right. That's always a good one to remember. You're partly right. So number 3, consider our motives and intention. Because the ego is always wanting to be right? It is not very interested in listening. It's not really interested in understanding, whereas the heart is interested in understanding. So see where you're coming from. Are you coming from curiosity and interest, or do you just want to be right and make wrong? We have to suspend our need to be right, right, sometimes. And the last thing is to establish that our friendship or our relationship is more important than our disagreement. Um, the love is more important than the opinions. And you know who was my greatest teacher in this is my mom. My mom and I, we had some really differing opinions politically. And, our relationship, our love was way more important to me than those differences. Sometimes we just agree to disagree and change the subject, shift the subject. So, in the spirit of our great teachers and our greatest spiritual teachings, let us water the seeds of nonviolence. That's what we can do. We can water those seeds. We can water the seeds of wise discernment, patience, and then the commitment to communication, right? I definitely do not mean bury your head in the sand. I hugely encourage being proactive to support what you value most. And in fact, I want to hear just one word. I want to hear one word from you. I want to hear what we collectively value. Just call out one thing that's a deep value of yours. Love, peace, compassion, freedom, listening, service, truth. What was that? Rest? Trust. Thank you. Integrity. Yes. Respect. Healing. What's that? Friendship. Yes. What's that? Family. Yes. Acceptance. Presence. Yes. Allowing. I want my allowance too. That is valuable. Anything else? Thank you. I so appreciate hearing that. And it feels, we are affirming it as we speak it. Our community, our spiritual community of values, what we value most. Our country as a whole, I feel like it needs to wake up every day and go, what are my deepest values? What is most important? And then how do I live that? Let me live that more fully today. So I just feel we can do this. I feel like Barbara Marx Hubbard says our crisis is a birth. We're in a birth, and it's like a lot of old things are needing to fall away and new things are needing to come forth, and it's a liminal time. It can feel concerning. I really encourage you to take care of the anxiety and know that you are not helpless, and it is not hopeless. We are with God. We are with presence. We are with that living, loving awareness. And with that, all things are possible. And we can bring about the world we wish to see. It begins within. It begins with us. So on that note, I'll share another Gandhi quote. When I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time, they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it always. Ho. So in closing, let us hold the vision for the highest good of all, that all beings live together in peace. We are creating it right here, right now. And let us release feelings of anxiety. Let us cultivate inner calm. And remember that we are with God and all things are possible, and that love will prevail. Thank you all. Om Shanti.